but you also spent a lot of time looking at examples of abuse of police authority. I mean, some of them real atrocities. And, you had to sort out conflicting versions of events, get at hidden truths. You were immersed in this issue for some time, and I'm wondering what your reaction was to the death of George Floyd at the hands of the Minneapolis police and the days of protest that followed. Did this have an extra resonance for you?
Oh, sure. And like many people, I thought this is an old story in so many terrible ways. I mean, some of the worst of this happened with the Rangers a little over 100 years ago, along with invent police brutality, but they perfected it down there on the border. Where they operated is what we would now term death squads. And as you noted in the intro, they executed hundreds, perhaps thousands of Mexicans and Mexican Americans. And some of those were bandits who had attacked white-owned farms and ranches, but many of them had committed no crimes. They were guilty of having brown skin.
And as you kind of watched these events, had you developed thoughts about how this culture can change?
Well, I think it has to change in so many ways, as so many people have pointed out, but I think in terms of history, it's important to take a look at all the old stories, as I've done here, and pick apart the legends and look at different points of view, find different voices here, and talk about what really happened. Help us understand what's really behind all of this. If we start to understand it, I think we can start to deal with it.
Okay, so let's talk about the Rangers. They go all the way back to 1823, when Anglo settlers first moved into what would later become Texas. And the early Rangers were not exactly the crisply uniformed force they would eventually become. You want to describe these guys, the early Rangers?
Yeah, they were a ragtag bunch. About 10 of them had been put together mainly to deal with the Karankawa Indians, who were a coastal tribe in Texas. They were very big Native Americans, large physically, and they were trying to protect their land. It was what they saw as interlopers. And the Texas settlers who came from places like Tennessee, Mississippi, Arkansas, Missouri, they wanted the Karankawa out of there. And Stephen F. Austin, the father of modern Texas, declared that the Karankawa needed to be exterminated. So that was really the proto-Rangers. That was their first mission, to protect against the Karankawas and then finally to eliminate them, which they did.
You said they were a ragtag bunch, no uniforms, right? Tough guys.
Well, yeah, they were farmers, they were teachers, they were cowmen, they were, a bunch of working stiffs who signed up to try to protect the settlement. They didn't last very long, and they ran out of ammunition and food, so they went back to their regular jobs. The beginning of the Rangers was very murky and irregular, and sort of struggled along for a number of years until 1835, when the provisional government of the Republic of Texas formally established the Texas Rangers.
So Texas wins its independence from Mexico in 1836, the military campaign that included the Alamo. And you write that the Anglo country was rich in enemies, these ranchers and farmers in Texas. There were Mexicans to the south, Indians throughout. So what role did the Rangers play in the decades that followed?
Well, they were very skilled executioners on the behalf of the white power structure. They did fight Mexicans who might come across the border. They sometimes went across the border themselves to get cattle and other things. And they fought the Indians. They wiped the Cherokees out. They wiped out some other tribes. And then they had to fight the Comanches, who were a much more difficult battle.
Now, in the late 1840s, after Texas had joined the Union, the United States, the U.S. fought a war with Mexico that would lead to a huge expansion of U.S. boundaries at Mexico's expense. And a lot of the fighting was in Texas, in areas near Mexico. What was the role of the Rangers in that conflict?